play among us. Let me see what
All righty, I think. Okay, I think we're ready. We're Facebook Live, we're recording, we can get started. So I want to welcome everybody who's here. And if you're joining us on Facebook, thank you. Or if you're watching us later in rerun, that's always fun too. I just want to introduce myself for those who don't know me. My name is Leona Adamczyk, and I'm a parent consultant at CPAC, which is Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center. We thank you for joining us today. We have with us Diana Perry, who is a psychologist at the Child Health and Development Institute, and she's the Senior Project Coordinator. And I'm going to let her introduce herself today and then let us know what we're going to be talking about and why she's here joining us. So welcome, Diana.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Should I go ahead and share my screen now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi. We'll do that. Yeah, thank you again. I really want to thank anybody who is joining or listening or thinking about the topic of mental health or trauma or the exposure of trauma to for children and families. What I'm hoping to do here today is to kind of give a brief overview of trauma, what it looks like, what the major experiences are that students and families here in Connecticut are experiencing, and then kind of move into more of the resources that are available throughout the state for kids, for families, and for communities to kind of utilize, and even schools and districts to kind of understand and decrease the effects that trauma can have on a whole myriad of things. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started on that. Try to switch my slides. There we go. So again, like Leona had said, I am from the Child Health and Development Institute of Connecticut. We're based in Farmington, but we run programs and projects all across the state. Our ultimate goal here at CHDI is really to ensure that all of the children within the state of Connecticut have access to the supports that they need in their communities to ensure that they have strong health and well-being. And if they don't already have that, that we can connect them to resources that can help build more resilience within their lives and the lives of their families and communities. So that's where I'm kind of coming from today. And my goals overall for this, and again, just in case I didn't already say it, which I don't think I did, if you're live and you have a question, or if you're here on Zoom with us and you have a question or a thought or a comment, please feel free to just throw it out there. I do have a slide deck that is quite lengthy, but I don't mind stopping if there's something on your mind. I'd rather kind of go there and see where we get, because these slides will end up being available to you afterwards. But essentially, I'm just going to share a little bit of information about mental health. That was my son upstairs, if you heard him scream. And then I'll share the supports and interventions that are available. And then I hope to offer a space for us to talk about any questions you have around trauma and mental health, especially in the time that we're living in now and what we're seeing across the state and across the country and across the world with respect to kind of trauma and toxic stress and some of the institutional shifts that need to occur. So I hope that you'll feel comfortable kind of bringing anything in to the conversation, and we can kind of go from there. But to get started, I think one thing I want to kind of locate us in is this idea of mental health. And the World Health Organization, as you can see, has a pretty good definition of what mental health really should be thought of as. And really, it's a state of being where a person really can see that they have ability, right? And that they can, even if they're in a stressful time, that they have coping skills to work through that stressful time, and that they feel that they can be productive and offer contributions to their community, right? So this idea of mental health is really that somebody has this internal awareness that they have inner strength and something to give to the world. Mental illness, on the other hand, is usually something that's diagnosed, right? When you go to a therapist or something like that. And it's kind of the opposite of that. It's when that ability or that awareness, that self-awareness that you have something good inside of you is not there for whatever reason, and that it disrupts a person, child, adult, anyone. It disrupts their ability to really be engaged in their world, and participate in activities that they want to participate or that other people are participating in. So that's a lot, you know, and there's a lot of factors why somebody would or would not feel like they have mental health. And we're seeing a lot of those factors playing out across the country these days. But one of them that's hugely important to think about is this idea of trauma. And this is a really kind of lengthy definition of what trauma is. But essentially, a trauma is something that is either witnessed or experienced by a person. You know, and witnessed can be they see something happening to somebody in live real time, or they even see it happening on TV, right? Or in other ways. And that thing that they're witnessing or experiencing is usually something that's very threatening and that causes severe kind of fear of actual or threatened death or serious injury. And this can be something that happens once, or it can be something that happens over time repeatedly. Up here on the screen, you'll see some examples of traumatic experiences. A lot of what we're seeing in Connecticut that does relate to community violence, complex trauma, which is something where you have multiple kind of traumatic or toxic stressors happening at the same time, domestic violence, school violence, and in pockets throughout Connecticut, we do have a lot of people that have experienced immigration or refugee-related traumas that they're kind of coming to us or to our schools or to our communities, needing to kind of talk about, process, or heal from. There's a lot of other traumas that aren't on this list. This is just kind of some examples. Then there's this idea of child traumatic stress. So not everybody who experiences or witnesses a trauma has kind of an adverse or a negative effect from that trauma, right? But some people do. And there's a lot of different reactions that can occur when someone experiences a traumatic event. There's a whole list of things here that you can see: emotional upset, depression, anxiety, difficulties maintaining relationships, kind of stomach pains or other kind of somatic experiences that people have, withdrawing from their family, friends, communities, or even other kind of behaviors that might occur as a result of trauma to kind of mitigate some of those factors, like substance use or kind of other unhealthy or dangerous behaviors. So these are all kind of ways that traumatic stress can present itself that might actually look, you know, that people seeing them might not actually associate them with a trauma. Overall, I think we know now through literature and research and through, for many of us, personal experience, that trauma is something that does not happen in one type of place or for one type of person. Trauma is pervasive and can happen universally. And it can, if not noticed and if there's no interventions or supports available, it can really create some major developmental roadblocks in a person's life, no matter how old they are when they experience that trauma. One of those can be that it elicits the type of response within the person that it makes building relationships really hard, or even maintaining relationships that once were strong. It can make that really hard to do as well. So another thing that we really know is that it's really important to have space to talk about trauma, whether it be the person that directly experienced it or the people that know them, like family and friends, right? It's really important that we as a society cultivate spaces for people to honor and talk about what they've experienced, because talking about it and having a place where it's held is part of that kind of healing experience. This is just, there's also a lot of research out there that speaks to how having trauma exposure that goes untreated or unrecognized can unfortunately potentially impact academic outcomes. And these are sometimes there's reading ability that is halted. There can be more suspensions and expulsions that occur because of reactivity or because of other things. More days of absences from school, just sometimes managing one's stress reactions makes it too difficult to also go into a school and deal with all of that at the same time. GPA can be lowered, and sometimes graduation rates can also be impacted. And that's all kind of evidence in literature throughout time. But it's not all bad though. I mean, I know I started off this whole slide deck. It's basically pretty depressing when you think about what can happen when trauma is unresolved or not acknowledged. But there's a lot of, it's not always bad. It doesn't always result in those things that I just mentioned. And the reactions can be quite temporary, right? That you can have kind of a really acute or strong reaction at first, and then you can over time kind of grow and develop and build resiliency in a way that those reactions can kind of go away with time. The brain is a malleable thing. On this slide, if you're seeing it in front of you, it says young brains are malleable, but we also know that human brains in general can shift and change when the proper relationships are there, or when things like meditation or other things are used to kind of help the brain get into more healthy coping styles. And also we know that prevention and treatment can work.
You guys have a wonderful retirement, and I do hope.
So before I continue, I just want to make sure that there's no kind of questions right now. I'm going to go into kind of what are the available treatments and resources here in Connecticut, but I just don't know if there was anything that came up around anything that was shared now that we would want to kind of touch on.
If anybody has a question that they want to ask, feel free to unmute, or you can ask it in the chat box. We are monitoring that for questions. I'm just going to check Facebook real quick.
Sure.
But I think we are.
Nothing on Facebook.
Yeah, thank you, Kyo. And Kyo has joined us. I told Diana that you were probably going to join us. So it looks like we're good to continue on. Thank you.
So what you're seeing in front of you is a map of most of the state of Connecticut. And this map is showing all of the different evidence-based practices that CHDI, my organization, helps to disseminate across the state. As you can see, there's some areas that are very saturated, and there are some that are not at all. And I think that that's unfortunately something that happens all too often in states, right? Is that there are some places that are heavily resourced and others that are not so much. But this is just kind of, this is a little bit of an older map, but it does show where throughout the state you can find a lot of different evidence-based practices. And I'll speak to in a little bit later how you can actually go and search for practices or treatments or interventions yourself online. Some of the evidence-based practices that we help bring to the state of Connecticut are listed here. So something called ARC, CBITS, Bounce Back, the Child and Family Traumatic Stress Intervention, MATCH, and TF-CBT. These are all kind of manualized treatment programs that are designed to treat and reduce symptoms of post-traumatic stress. I'm going to kind of go into them a little bit so that you can learn a little bit about what each of these are and who are good, kind of the good age ranges and reasons why somebody might want to access one of these. So the first was ARC. And again, the whole point of ARC is to support caregivers in building healthy attachments to their children, and to support them in feeling competent to help their kids and themselves regulate emotions when they come up. Good emotions, not so good emotions. So they do that through kind of learning how to identify what feelings are and attune to kids when they're having certain feeling states. And the whole point is really to help both the kid and the family kind of develop an identity for themselves that is more healthy and more regulated. There's a lot of flexibility in this treatment model, but again, it does focus on having caregiver involvement for young kids as young as 3 and all the way up till 18. CBITS, so ARC is something that's usually typically done in either a home-based setting or a kind of an outpatient treatment program type of setting. CBITS is a school-based group therapy option that's available in a lot of different schools throughout Connecticut. And it's for kids in grades 5 through 12. It's a 10-week manualized group treatment option that includes kind of exposure sessions for kids as well as some teacher and caregiver educational settings. The criteria for CBITS to be involved in CBITS would be that a child was able to report at least one trauma and a moderate amount of post-traumatic stress symptoms. Bounce Back, very similar to CBITS. It's an adaptation for kids as young as kindergarten. It's also 10 sessions. there's a little bit more emphasis on caregivers just because of sometimes younger kids need more help from their community in order to kind of process and understand the lessons that are being taught in something like a trauma group. And it's a lot more playful to kind of allow for the kind of exuberance that typically is connected to, you know, a little, like a kindergartner, a first grader, or second grader. They're both have homework, and they're both designed to reduce post-traumatic stress symptoms and improve coping skills. I just wanted to share this slide. And we have a lot of different statistics on these different evidence-based practices, but I think this is really important to think about just when we think about trauma and how often it's not talked about, and sometimes how it's not always known how much trauma is experienced, especially here, you know, even here in Connecticut. And so just wanted to share that for kids, and we've had over almost 3,000 kids participate in CBITS and Bounce Back. For kids who participate in CBITS, when they come into the group, they report about 8 types of traumas, not experiences of, but just different types of trauma. And that number is not so far different for Bounce Back kiddos who are as young as kindergarten. So that just, I think, shows me just how, you know, how prevalent trauma exposure is here in Connecticut and how much our kids really are being exposed to trauma. Maybe not all of them are having negative effects of trauma, but there's a lot of it happening that kids are kind of processing and internalizing. So it's a good thing that Connecticut has so many trauma interventions available. This group also has really, really great caregiver satisfaction and has a strong ability to reduce trauma symptoms. CFTSI, this is a different type of treatment. Most of the other treatments that I'm talking about are given or offered to kids when they already have a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. This one is a briefer treatment designed to be given within 30 or 45 days of experiencing an event. And the goal is to kind of meet a child in that acute stress state and kind of prevent as a preventative so that hopefully they don't actually end up having a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's for those kids that you hear about, have just experienced something, and if you can connect them to a treatment provider that offers CFTSI, they can kind of go through this brief short-term treatment with a caregiver or a caring adult, and hopefully mitigate the need for ongoing trauma-focused treatment. It's a family strengthening approach, totally geared toward opening up dialogue, which is sometimes very, very hard for people in general to do when it comes to traumatic events, right? We sometimes just want to like move on, right? And just try to have a good day and put the best foot forward. But this is really designed to help families feel more comfortable talking about what happened and just letting it be, so that those feelings and those emotions and those reactions can minimize more quickly. Match is another treatment protocol available across the state. And this one's really cool because it can treat a wide range of diagnoses. Anything from anxiety, depression, to trauma, to even conduct issues can be treated through this model. And it's for kids as young as 6 and up to age 15. And the last one that I'll speak to is TF-CBT, which is probably the most widely known here in Connecticut, or maybe even nationally. It's for kids from 3 to 18, and it's a shorter term. You can do it in about a half a year. Mostly individual sessions where a child is working with a therapist through the different modules, but families are also invited to participate in hearing the story from the child's perspective. There are 8 different components to TF-CBT, and they include psychoeducation, relaxation, and direct exposure treatment. It ends with kind of enhancing safety and kind of planning for the next trauma should it occur. If you want to learn more about any of these treatments, or if you want to know where you can find somebody that offers this treatment near where you are or where a child is that you think might benefit, just Google CHDI EBP directory, and you'll get a quick link to what will then bring you to something that looks like this. And you can kind of type in your location and the distance that you're willing to travel, And you can either click a particular model, or you can kind of leave it open and see what comes up. There's also a lot of other programs that CHDI helps to disseminate that are not strictly kind of student focused in terms of like being an intervention or a trauma treatment. One of them is a school-based diversion initiative, which is available at a lot of different schools. It's available across the state. And the goal of that is to kind of be a step in to this idea of the kind of school to prison pipeline. So it's designed to acknowledge that there is a tendency for kids to get involved in the juvenile justice system, and that involvement in the juvenile justice system can then create more difficulties. And so this is an intervention designed for schools to try to reduce that juvenile justice involvement by targeting the mental health needs of the students and kind of hopefully mitigating and reducing the number of arrests and suspensions that kids who might otherwise end up in the JJ system might experience. So it's done through a myriad of different things, direct contact with students, and also building knowledge amongst the community or the school staff so that they can understand kind of that, the specific needs of kids who might find themselves involved in juvenile justice interventions. These are some ways that you can learn more about SBDI and what it is, or how to bring it to your school, or how it's working here in Connecticut. And then there's Mobile Crisis, which most people know as 211, which is a resource that you can call up if you're having concerns around housing or food insecurity, or you need to find a particular medical specialty. But this is also something that you can call that can kind of link you to more crisis stabilization or assessment interventions that can happen in the moment. So if you're dealing with a child who is experiencing a crisis and you feel like you need support in helping that child calm down or get through it, you can call 211 and they can kind of assess the needs and even send somebody out to you if they feel that that would be useful for you in that moment. There's a host of other things. I've got so many different slides here just in terms of like books that are available to talk about mental health and trauma and resiliency with kids. There's kidsmentalhealthinfo.com, which is a great resource for learning about mental health and learning about what you can do as a caregiver or a parent or even a provider. There's the National Traumatic Stress Network that is really putting even a lot more out there nowadays, now that COVID-19 is occurring, just really trying to focus on caregivers and parents and how to help you all feel more supported in monitoring and supporting your kids as they might be experiencing mental health concerns. I've also put in a ton of other web-based resources that you can kind of go to on your own to learn how to talk about racism or help kids or yourselves build resilience. And there's a lot of stuff out there for kind of preventing suicide as well. And this is kind of like a time now, or if there are any questions or there's any kind of discussion topics, we can kind of go through there.
I think we had one on Facebook. Let me just go back to it. So we did have a question that says, is there a targeted effort for those coming out of juvenile justice?
I mean, I think there's a lot of targeted efforts happening across the state. The one that I mentioned was the SBDI. So if there was a child that was coming out of juvenile justice program and entering back into a school system, that school would be alerted that that child had come out of that system and would be available to participate in the SBDI intervention.
Does anybody have, thank you very much. Is there anybody else that has any questions or follow up? You can feel free to unmute yourself. It doesn't look like we have a lot of questions right now. It's a lot of information. It's tremendous.
It is, I know.
Resources, which I just think is amazing. So thank you so much. Keo?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, have you noticed a pattern in the recent weeks, or has it stayed steady ever since COVID? I guess as things are kind of going through the phases of things starting to open up, have you noticed that for some folks, there's been a change, like feeling things are coming to fruition and normalcy, or is there still fear or concern?
I'll preface my answer by saying that this is anecdotal. We haven't, collected and analyzed any data appropriately for me to be speaking from that standpoint. But I will say, based on all of the different kind of communities that we're connected to, that there actually is concern, concern in schools, concern in communities and families. There's more of an awareness about the impact of isolation, the impact of economic downturns, the impact of everything that's happening, right? Being home all the time, being isolated from peers, on the development of children and the ability for them to reach out, right, and feel connected to society again. So I think there's a lot of concern happening right now, and a lot of discussions in schools around the importance of not only focusing on academics, but having spaces for staff and students to talk about the socio-emotional component, right? The mental health component of all this. I think most of us, even if in our own lives, can see how this has impacted balance and equilibrium, right? And how there's a lot of shifts going on. And then you have a lot of populations here in Connecticut and across the nation that were already disenfranchised or hidden, right? That are even more hidden now or afraid, right?
Yeah.
So there's all this kind of stuff happening, which is frightening to some degree, right? Because it's showing us how much need there is, but it's good to another degree because it's having people kind of think a little bit more about the idea of mental health and the idea of community resilience, right? And building communities up and resourcing them. I don't know if that answers your question exactly. I'd be curious if you have thoughts on that as well.
No, I only say because I do a parent support call Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and it used to be 5 days, but due to the summer and other things that we want to do, we switched it to 3 days. But the ongoing theme that parents are sharing about their kids, and this is specific to middle school to high school age kids, is a overwhelming sense of depression, task avoidance. They pretty much checked out a few weeks ago from wanting to do schoolwork, resistant to schoolwork. It's a really different learning style for some kids. Some kids are probably flourishing because it's more independent than having your teacher in a face-to-face in a classroom. But for other kids, they're really struggling with online learning. And it's just gotten worse for families to try to support their kids because at some point you want to support the kid and you know the academic is important, but if it's at the cost of you and your child kind of bumping heads, since there's no real outlet to get out of the home, to engage in community, to have other supports like you would in the school, I think families are also, parents at least, are also struggling to help manage when am I a teacher and when am I mom?
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure for families and for parents to play that role. It's not like we don't want to, but it's just completely different from being a parent to a child, right?
Absolutely.
It's different from getting them to school and getting them to finish their homework. It's a lot more. It's a lot, and it's hard on, I think, the dynamic.
Because at least my 3 kids that are home, they're alleging that it's harder now. They constantly say to me, but I didn't get this much work when I was in school, and it wasn't this hard when I was in school. I don't know if that's true or not because I wasn't there, but what I can say is that I also have parents say that their children or child is struggling. So it makes you wonder, is this new material that's being introduced? Is this remediation work? Is this just going over something that was already worked on, but now the student has forgotten? Our kiddos tend to have IEPs, so they need repetition. Introducing new work, especially online and in a totally different platform, could be a challenge. So I'm not saying that they're not getting any new work.
Right.
But where do you find balance? How do you draw the line as a parent to say, I got your back, I want to help you, you need a mental health day, or we're not going to work as hard today, or you just say, you know what, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to wait to the fall and figure out what happens. All kids are going to regress because our kids are not starting off in the same level as their typical peers. So it's hard when I hear teachers say, don't worry about it, mom, we're going to let them catch up. But they never started off the same baseline anyway. So they're even further behind. And I think that's why parents are really frightened, because if we keep letting it go and letting it go, how long is it going to take for these kids to catch up when they were already probably a year or two or more behind?
Right. Like there were really solid reasons why kids have individualized educational plans or other, ways of learning built into their typical school day. And because of this whole kind of crisis pandemic situation where it was just like, we're going to distance learn on Monday, it's Friday, just letting you know, we don't know what we're doing, right? Districts are saying this. It's like everybody was caught in this situation of having to have a steep learning curve and figuring it all out for every student has not probably yet occurred, right? But in terms of that kind of comment around, it's harder now, right? I think part of that also stems from, there's a buffer that happens when you're in school. One of the hallmarks of building resilience and having strong mental health is having strong relationships and connections and interpersonal relationships, right? And so so much of that has been lost.
Yes.
That human to human contact between those teachers or those staff members that really made people invested in coming to school, right? Or even playing around in the hallway on the way to the next class, for those 3 minutes before you have to go learn math, right? Like all of these different things that are kind of the more fun parts of being in school, if you will, are gone now. Now it's just get on the computer, do your assignments, blah, 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 and all of it is lost, which can really make the pressure of learning and the intensity of learning a little bit more in your face, if you will, than having kind of those buffers and those kind of little play experiences.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm having a harder time supporting families, only because they're also either families that have already had therapeutic support services before COVID, or they're struggling to get support because telehealth may not be helpful to their child. They don't want to get on the phone call. They don't want to, I don't know what it is about doing the live video call. Some kids do not engage with live video calls either. So it's a new way of doing things, and parents are struggling. I had one mom on Friday that was just really struggling and felt that her daughter's therapist was not listening to her.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, and then you have to think on top of that, like parents are struggling. Humans in general are struggling right now with this new way that we live, right? And so on top of that, there is just a natural increase in pressure on parents to be the everything for their kids, even more so than in the past, right? And not having that knowledge or that ability to be able to manage all this. Of course, it ends up leaving parents feeling like they're not doing enough, or they're not doing well, or they're hurting their kids, right? It's just a lot of pressure right now.
And parent shaming, like making parents feel bad that they may need a break because it's 24/7, literally. At least before, you could count on the support of a teacher or a para or a special ed teacher, school social work, school psychologist, speech pathologist, OT. I mean, there's all these other supports that are built into the school day, and you don't have any of that. And they're introducing potentially new work, or maybe it's not necessarily new work, but how the teacher taught it and how you're teaching it, it's two different styles, so the kid's not getting it. There's a lot of mourning going on, mourning from routines to staff, support staff, and the parent just having to figure it all out. Not that you can't, right? But we do it differently. And I've had my own 8-year-olds, like, my teacher doesn't do it that way. And I'm like, I know, but I don't know how your teacher does it. Like, I want to help you. And then, he becomes resistant. And the 11-year-old, it's like, it's so much harder to do work with you. My teacher is not like that. And then you feel like you're failing. And then you're also on top of that trying to work if you're working from home. And then there's some parents that are essential workers, that they're actually working out in the
Right.
field and they have to leave home and then come at the end of the day tired, exhausted, and sit down and try to make up this work. So it's been a really challenging, 2.5 months?
Yeah, I think.
Feels so much longer.
Yes, probably 3 months. Maybe I'm off. I know for New Haven, the last day of school was March 12th.
Yeah.
So we're
so
potentially
coming up
going on like 3 months.
Kia, when you're talking, and Diana, when you were talking, like one of the things you said, like in our face, right? Like it's kind of in their face now, the learning and everything. But I was going back to thinking about us even as working from home. A lot of the families that are working from home, we're having that same feeling. And so sometimes we have to think about it like that's how our kids feel about school, right? So we complain that, or I complain, it's Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting. I miss my car ride. Right? That was my buffer between meetings or between home and the kids or whatever, right? So I miss my car ride. So it's kind of like, you know, the things that they're missing, their walk down the hallway, the meeting with their friends, the, you know, the different times of getting to see those things. And so we're all going from one thing to the next in this new environment. And there's just huge pieces that we're missing, and we're all, you know, it's from us to the children. I can definitely see it where we're all kind of, anyway, sorry, I had to jump in.
That's great.
No, I appreciate it because it's true. It's true. I mean, I know for my 17-year-old, because he's a senior this year, he has a different set of losses from not having prom because it was canceled. Now he's having a drive-through graduation. The way it's set up is that the kids, they're gonna have their name called, so they have to stay in the car. Only the student is allowed to exit the vehicle, walk over, get the diploma, and then after they get the diploma, they have to, I guess a staff person is gonna take pictures, but they have to get back in the car and leave immediately the premises. So there is no hugging, no last minute closure. You know, the kids love to take pictures. And I remember 8th grade graduation for him in particular, where this teacher that he swore like for years that she hated him. At 8th grade graduation, they were hugging each other and she was telling him, you know I was hard on you, but it's because I believed in you, and look how good you finished off the school year. And he was crying. There is none of that. There is no closure with the teachers that he had, closures with his friends. So he even said to me last week, he was like, what's the point of even going? And in my head, I'm like, because I want my cap and gown picture. That's why you're going. But I get it, right? The value, it's not as meaningful. So New Haven is planning a parade by Lighthouse for the kids next week.
Oh, wow.
For all seniors. So I don't know what that's going to look like because, you know, there's so many high schools in New Haven. I don't think we'll participate in that because he doesn't like, you know, big spaces and lots of people. But also because of what is that really going to look like? We're all just going to be in a car and just driving by, and then teachers are supposed to be waving to the kids.
I know it's like their final goodbye. I was wondering how Rocky Hill's doing the same thing, and a very similar graduation situation too. But that adds to all of it as well, you know. You know, some people are like, they want more, and other people are like, let them graduate and start to move on. Like they've already had a hard time. We don't need to keep them attached to high school. Let's go to the next, or any school, you know, right? Let's get moving to the next point.
And that's still unknown because for some kiddos, they're still waiting to see what's going to happen because summer youth employment is kind of up in the air. You know, if you're in Level Up, you know, for kids that are through BRS, I was just talking to a counselor, like, what are you guys doing with kids over the summer? Because normally they get them work and they assign where to go, and everything seems to be up in the air. So for a lot of our kids, the older kids, it's just that constant having to wait and no plan. And as a mom, you know, he's going to be 18 in the next few weeks. I feel bad because he's like, I want to work. I want to do this. I want to do that. And all I keep saying is like, well, we have to wait and see. We have to wait and see. So I feel bad, and I'm struggling for him because, you know, we don't have a plan.
You know, and I just, when you say that, I kind of go back to, and I had shared with Diana before we had signed on today, it was, you know, I would love for me to have a plan for one of my children, but I feel like, I don't know if he's going to be successful at it right now. So then I worry about that because, you know, there's so many issues with anxiety and things like that about everything that's going on that we can't really get him to engage in things. And so if he takes on summer employment, I think it would be awesome, but I'm also very concerned that he might really fail at it, which would then cause different sites of trauma. So I just feel like we're all going through so much and the kids are going through so much. And does anybody else on here have questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or you can type them away.
Absolutely.
Keo, thank you for joining us
Absolutely.
today.
Yeah.
I'm just going to check Facebook. But if nobody has any questions or closing, Diane, do you have anything you want to say in closing? Keo?
Again, I just want to, I'm very grateful for this opportunity to share out this information and to have this conversation around it. And I hope that if anybody does have questions afterwards or concerns or anything they're seeing in their community that they need, that they would reach out to one of us so that we can kind of try to connect you to whomever it could be that could be supportive.
Thank you. I appreciate you joining us so much today and sharing all the resources. We're definitely, besides being on this video, we'll definitely make sure that we're sharing the resources so that parents can go back and access them. And again, if they have any questions at all, your information's on there and you can definitely call CPAC. We're always happy to help and guide you toward where you need. So if nobody has any questions, I'll thank all of you for joining us today, and I hope you're going to attend one of our other sessions. So Keo, in Spanish on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Yes, and also at 1. And then on Wednesdays at 4, we have a learning series. So we try to bring presenters to talk about a particular topic.
So if you'd like to join us in Spanish. And then on Thursday this week, we will actually be talking about team meetings in our English support call at 3 o'clock. So whether you're having team meetings, PPTs, talking about ESY, whatever's going on out there, we're going to talk about what it looks like to participate in the new normal of virtual meetings. So we hope that you'll join us for one of these sessions. And again, Diana, thank you so much. We'll see you guys all soon.
Absolutely. Have a good one.